Hello, everyone. Thank you for the first global and international engagement webinar of the fall semester. And so we are so fortunate today because we have Dr. Shameem Farouk, and we also have Dr. Kurt Bonk. The other thing that we have that we are celebrating today is that this webinar is in conjunction with Malaysia's 65th Independence Day. August 31st is our Independence Day. And so Dr. Farouk today will discuss the ways organizations can create inclusive educational programs and practices to support women and other traditionally marginalized employees to participate and benefit equally in the future of work. And so most of you, and I'm sure all of you know Dr. Bonks and his work, his impressive work and broad body of work in the field of online teaching and learning at Indiana University and beyond. So I welcome the both of you. The format of this will be 30 minutes of conversation between Dr. Bonk and Dr. Shameem Farouk. In Malaysia, you go by the first name. So is Dr. Shameem or just Shameem?
Shameem, yeah.
30 minutes of conversation between Shameem and Kurt. And after that, we open it up to the audience members to converse, to ask questions, to post questions on the Q&A. And so you will need to post your questions on the Q&A board, and we will, as the moderators, we will ask the questions for you. I have to say too, online right now with us is Sulia Nijiati, who's the program assistant for global and international engagement. And the other person is Ross Wilkerson, who's making this webinar possible technically. So welcome everyone, Dr. Shameem Farouk or Shameem and Dr. Kurt Bonk or Kurt, please take it away.
Well, thank you, Farida. And it's great to be invited to the first School of Education Global and International Engagement Initiative webcast, podcast, videocast show. And this is
of the year.
Yes. And this is a special day being both Dr. Pawan and Shameem are from Malaysia. And so it's special to be here on the 65th anniversary of the Independence Day in Malaysia. Big round of applause for that. And it's a lovely country. It's one of my favorite countries to visit. Go if you've not been to Malaysia. One of the most tolerant countries I've been to ever, and they're very diverse. I also will say today is the first day. Yesterday was my 30th year at IU. So today is the first day of my next 30 years. And I'm glad to start off the next 30 years with this podcast, webcast, videocast show. So Shameem is a person I've known for a while because she was here in our department in instructional systems technology at IU. And she learned a few things that she's been used along the way to move up the totem pole at Maybank and moved into executive kinds of positions there at Maybank to become the head of digital skills or the vice president of digital innovations. But before we get to that and start talking to her about what she's doing in her present job and in her future job role, I'd like for her to talk a little bit about her career to date, her little bio to date, and the training that she got at IU that enabled that rapid advancement within her career, both in the School of Ed as well as in the business school at IU, which was her minor, I believe. So Shameem, you want to tell us a little bit of background information?
Yes, thank you, Kurt, and thank you, Dr. Farida. So I'm going to do the Malaysian thing now, which is, to refer to my fellow Malaysian, Dr. Pawan and put a title in front of her first name, okay? So I'm going to refer to her as Dr. Farida, because that's what we do in Malaysia, in conjunction with our Malaysia Day. So, and firstly, I would like to thank, Dr. Farida for really organizing this, and also to the Global and International Engagement Center from the School of Education. So I think this is a really great initiative to bring diverse perspectives, understanding globally, and so forth. So thank you very much. It's also my honor and privilege to recognize Professor Kurt Bong, 30 years in Indiana University. Thank you so much for your service. I feel like I should say that as an alum.
I even have the honorary tie.
Amazing.
That's you don't get a company car or a villa in France, but you do get a tie. Dr. Kwan got me this tie, so.
That's thank you so much for your service. I have personally benefited from your class. Dr. Bong, if you remember, I'm remembering, right, you know, the days when I called you Dr. Bong.
Please call me Kurt for this show.
And I was actually sitting in your classroom from Malaysia at that time. Because
yes.
remember, we had a distance education kind of setup, and I was one of those students who was sitting in Malaysia in your class, and I remembered how engaging it was, even though I was sitting in Malaysia. So that was terrific teaching, I would say. Yeah, so incredible.
Back in the day, we were doing distance ed. Literally in the 1990s at Indiana University. It was set up to be a demonstration site for tech and education, which attracted people like you. So I'll go back to, you know, the question I had, you know, what prepped you for in your training for what you're doing today?
Yes, so I think I was reflecting back on how I got the ideas, you know, and how I got the inspiration and the thought processes that guided my work. And I have to say that, you know, you really don't realize it until you're doing it, that much of your instincts come from the education background. So I would say the IST department has really equipped me with the, you know, instructional systems design, methodology, systematic approaches, and lay on top of that, and this is what I'm going to talk about, a bit of the feel. It was not just about instruction, but it was also about championing and looking at the systems as a system as a whole, in order to ensure that the instructional approach was effective. So what do I mean by that? Dr. Melenda, earlier in the webinar, he spoke about the difference between IST, ISD, education technology. And I think education technology is when you get into thinking about the systems as a whole. What impacts education? What impacts the instruction? It's about the effectiveness of the teachers. It's about the resources that you have. It's about the support systems that you have for the students. So it goes beyond instruction. And so when I look at my work, taking a systems approach, and I remember Dr. Reigeluth, actually, I was sitting in his class and we had to read the book from Peter Sankey, The Fifth Discipline, right? And there you talk about the systems approach, right? Because it's not just the instruction that can create an impact, but also all the environmental variables, the leadership, the teachers, the quality of teachers that you have coming in and so forth, right? So taking a systems approach was absolutely necessary in trying to address how do we empower women? How do we empower women in a society that has certain, preconceived roles or rather, traditions, right, that continue to maybe permeate how we see women in the workforce. So that
how are you empowered at Maybank, where you're at right now? Right. What kinds of supports did you receive that really equipped you to move? You got Indiana prepared you well, but you had to build on that.
Right.
And I have a follow-up for that right away. But first, is there any couple specific things that you could point to that others who are young in their career might also take advantage of?
Sure. Now the other thing, so I got all my degrees, all my 4 degrees from IU. So I have to say that as I transitioned into the corporate world, so after I graduated from the doctoral program at IST, I went into the corporate world. And there, you know, the education that I received from the Kelly School of Business also played a prominent role. So, and to be honest, I would say I was trying, you know, early in my career, at least when I was leading a people, I started to notice, and we started to hire actually fresh graduates from various institutions. And when they came in, almost there was a bit of, I would say, I was a bit wondering where is the gap in knowledge, because when I graduated from IU School of Business, it did prepare me with certain skills. But in looking at the incoming, you know, incoming workforce to my team, at least, I saw that there were some gaps, and I couldn't reconcile what it was. And then I realized, hey, you know, in IU, probably I was prepared with more skills than some of the students that I was seeing coming in. So I just want to recognize the Kelly School of Business as well for that. But then as I went into the corporate world, I think, you know, the work that I have done in Maybank, it is certainly a product of the leadership that promotes and champions learning. So I have to say, that was one of the key leverage points that I had. I'll give you an example, Kurt. When Maybank needed to actually think about how are we going to transition as a digital bank, and how are we going to realize our aspirations to be a digital bank, we had our strategic retreats, you know, and that was fine. But my CEO, and I would like to recognize my CEO for that. He's no longer the CEO of Maybank, but he actually just left about a year ago. But he took all his senior executives, all the C-suites, you know, the CFO, the Chief Technology Officer, the Chief Risk Officer, the Chief Human Capital Officer. So all of us got in a room. We went to a place called Port Dickson, which Dr. Farida might know. We spent 1.5 days just talking about how do we upskill and reskill our workforce. Now, usually, many CEOs and the leadership team spend 1.5 days talking about business strategy. But I have not heard, or I have not at least experienced in my 20 years of experience in the corporate world, that we spend 1.5 days just talking about training, to be honest, and reskilling and upskilling. So that set the stage for how learning is important in Maybank, actually. So if that helps you.
Yeah, that does help. And it is one of my question areas that I want to address. How people are reskilled and upskilled today is different from when you graduated. The models too that you might have been trained on in IST and the business school are constantly changing and evolving and somewhat transforming. So how are training approaches and models today different? And what are you doing at Maybank, and what are others doing at other organizations to reskill and upskill their employees? For instance, we had a student named Raj who just finished his dissertation on microlearning, and that seems to be a trend. So is that one of the things, or are there other things that you're doing and putting in place there for the upskilling and reskilling of your employees?
Sure. Thanks for that. Really interesting question, Kurt, because let me put a backdrop a bit on where at least the Malaysian corporate sector, and more specifically also financial sector is at, because I think that shapes, and again going back to the systems approach, right, of what's necessitating the change and adaptation of instruction and training and learning. So if I take a step back, the industry in Malaysia, and I'm talking about many industries here: oil and gas, manufacturing, technology, telecoms, finance, right? These industries right now are currently being disrupted. Okay, disrupted, and I'll just come from two perspectives here. And there's many reasons for this, but let me just touch on one of the areas which is always talked about, which is the technological disruptions. I'll give you an example. For Maybank, the simple thing as email, okay? Email, when we process a loan, it used to be that a lot of documentation had to be signed, had to be, going through all sorts of different processes. And we had this job, a messenger, to take all these documents, right, from one level of the organization to the next level, to the next office, etc. So the messenger job was there in the banks, and not just Maybank, many banks, because of all these need for hard copies, right, signatures, etc. Now, with the advent of email, right, now this was many years back, but also now comes the culture of accepting digital in society. And because digital is also much more secure now, there are, cryptography, mechanisms, right, digital signatures, and it's accepted now. So that has now transformed or really gotten rid of the need for documents to be, signed the old way, and going through all these different manual processes. So now what happens is that we have a group, messengers, on a full-time employment in the bank with a reduced set of jobs, right? So what do we do? Now, and I will talk about how we address this later on. But when it comes to instruction, now, the speed of change is, as you know, Kurt, I don't have to preach to you, but the speed of change of technological evolution is also increasing. Now, we have huge data sets that are being integrated, right? So the rise of big data, the rise of machine learning, the rise of robotics, RPA, and so forth. So the speed in which this is changing is rapid. And if you look at the functions across organizations, finance, HR, operations, marketing, strategy, all the functions require that data-driven approach, because that is, again, the accepted strategic approach going forward for many organizations. So when the rapid changes are happening, now training, traditional training, let's take credit processing, in the bank, that it's no longer acceptable to do manual credit processing. You have to incorporate AI, machine learning, data-driven techniques. So the training has to actually change, not just talking about credit, but talking about how do you do AI and machine learning in credit? How do you do AI and machine learning in HR? How do you do AI and machine learning in finance, and so forth? So the training function, and by the way, the workforce works from 9 to 5, and they have a full-time job, a full workload. And so you don't have the ability to train employees for a prolonged duration. The speed that you have to do it is fast. You have to have a fast turnaround time. It has to be simple enough for all demographics to understand it, for technology to be part and parcel of the organization. So there's a lot of, and it has to be cheap, by the way, because we can increase the cost of operations, right? So all these things is, I think, shaping how the instruction needs to be delivered, right? Faster, cheaper, accessible, impactful. And do it all within one day, please.
and you've got it covered there, but you missed one thing.
Okay.
What you missed out on is talking well, it relates to my next question, talking about yourself. Because every time I talk to Shameem, she's got another idea for her educational growth. You're always thinking about what your next move is or what opportunities exist out there. And Shameem is a little bit different than many people in the corporate world, because she's both thinking about what's happening in her environment and how to improve it, but how to improve herself and how to do research on that. She's always got a research question in the back of her mind. And currently, Shameem is a Fulbright scholar from the U.S. Department, and she's a research fellow. I've recently And Dr. Farida's got a copy of this book, but I got a book of mostly Fulbright scholars writing stories of their visit at, they visited IU, and they're all around the world. I should get you for my next book like that. So, what is it about you that makes you different, or how are you supported? I mean, a lot of people aren't supported in the corporate world to do research, to go to get a Fulbright scholarship, take a sabbatical, and all that. That's not the norm that I hear. So you must have a different layer of support there. Different mentors. You might want to speak about your mentorship there. So what has enabled you to do multiple things? You've got 3 feet, 4 feet in different things. You know, the rest of us only have 2 feet planted. What tell us a little about that and about your curiosity, the inner curiosity in Shameem.
Sure. Thank you for that question. And I think, you know, our topic today is about helping women, right? And so I'll talk about the support structures that I have to help me as a woman and to also help other women, at least in Maybank and also at the country level.
And also those who might be marginalized in other ways. It might
absolutely.
be, yeah. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So now I'll talk about what drives that curiosity as well. But let's talk about the support structures to enable me to do what I can do. Number one, in Maybank, I think we have this tagline called humanizing financial services. It's our mission. It's our motto. And if you go to Maybank today, I think if you ask the 42,000 employees, right, what is the mission of Maybank? Everyone knows the mission of Maybank. And it's because it's steeped in our culture. During COVID-19, it was really natural for us to think about how we could help the hundreds and thousands of merchants, the food merchants. You know, Kurt, you've been to Malaysia, right? So we've got a lot of food merchants, you know, small-time enterprises, retail shops, who during COVID no longer had livelihoods, right? Because people would not go to the shops, you know, to eat. And so what do we do with them, right? So it's very natural for Maybankers, and we call our staff Maybankers, to think about, okay, how can we actually help them from a humanizing aspect? So we created a platform within 3 weeks, came up with a platform where we connected merchants and customers together, and no fees, right? And from Maybank side, we organized the payment system, organized the delivery channel so that the merchants could actually continue their livelihoods on this platform. Now, the support, what drove that is that humanizing aspect, right? The care for the society, care for the community, and also care for employees. So Maybank also, now for the employees, created a mechanism where, well, employees should be able to live up to their potential. And how can we enable that, right? So in Maybank, one of the ways in which we enable continuous learning and growth and exploration is this sabbatical policy that we have, which enables, if you have 2 years of service in Maybank, you can get 2 years of sabbatical, and apply for a 2-year sabbatical. Now, with all your benefits intact, meaning to say your health coverage and whatever, especially health is a big one, and whatever benefits you get. Of course, salary is not there. However, if you're on sabbatical, you can take up research grants, you can go even into part-time jobs to explore those kind of jobs, so to speak, as long as it's not competitive in nature to the bank. Now, why do we do this? It's because we want to give our staff the ability to realize their potential. We all have midlife crises, you know, and things like that. We all want to question about whether this is meaningful to us, whether our jobs are meaningful to us. And if we give the opportunity to people, when they come back, they will be refreshed. But if they find out that this is no longer for them, then it will also create a good opportunity for them to move forward, right? They have the skills, they have the experience. And although we lose the talent, but we also attract talents because of our humanizing approach to education of the workforce, right? So that's one support mechanism. The other support mechanisms, of course, my leadership team. So again, I had really good supervisors, right, who recognized, say, hey, you know, I have a PhD, I may want to do research, and as long as I've been productive, I have a track record of being productive at least, right? So they have empowered me to actually take on this research. Now, in terms of purpose, right? What is my purpose? So like I said, there is a huge issue right now to solve the issue of what do we do with workforce. I give the example of the messenger that will be that no longer has a messenger job, right? Or is reduced dramatically. Now extend that to all the different types of jobs that are manual, repetitive, and routine. A lot of the workforce will be displaced if education does not find a solution. So I, identify myself as an educator. So and I see the pressing issue that we have in industry. So what motivates me is this issue on how can we continue to make the workforce employable for the future, and how can we make sure that it's inclusive, women, ethnicity, minority ethnic groups, indigenous populations, age. There are people, 40, 50-year-old who need to learn technology. Well, how can we make them learn technology in the simplest manner, right? So that's what is driving me, the need to solve that problem, right? The workforce employability problem, and to make it inclusive. Yeah.
So while you're helping everyone else out in the world,
yeah.
Who's your mentor, or who are your mentors, and what do they provide for you? What kind of, and how have they changed maybe over time?
Right. So one of my biggest mentors are my parents, right? Because both my parents are educators. My mom is an educator in secondary school, and she taught me. And when she retired, she actually gave tutoring. And some of the students that came to her did not do well in things like math and science. They were failing actually. But no matter the background of the students, be it some of them couldn't had speech issues actually, no matter and some of them actually were coming from poor backgrounds, without good education paths, so they really couldn't understand a lot of things that were taught in classes. But no matter their background, she always, she has a really great record in turning them around, and each one of them would actually get an A or a B in math, right? So that's inspiring, right? Because the teacher, right, if the education or the instruction is good enough, it should work for everyone, irrespective of your background, predispositions, ADHD, dyslexia. It should work, right? And our job as educators is to find the solution to make it work. Now that's one mentor. My dad was an IST alum. And that's how I got
Go IU!
And
got the pa.
Yeah, so this is an IST day as well, right? So yes, so I worked for him for 5 years in consulting. And that
Not everybody can say they worked for their father for 5 years. That's really and now you're probably training him, so
no, he is a wealth of knowledge and an inspiration in terms of furthering and challenging the boundaries. So I don't know, I think it's the IST education that just predisposes us to challenge the boundaries, right? No, we are, I just saw online education #1 in the US, right? For IST, Masters Online Education.
we're #1.
So my only ask for the IST department is to make it affordable. Because I did the calculation, it costs about 22,000 US dollars. That translates to about 100,000 ringgit because of the currency issue and all that. And I actually wanted to get my colleagues. In fact, I was promoting the IST department and saying, a lot of the things that I know actually came from there. But when they asked me how much, and I said 22,000 US dollars, they said, I think we're going to go to Coursera. Right. So I think that is our challenge, to be honest. How can we make higher education, not just primary education, free for all.
So we're getting near the end before Q&A, and you mentioned one other role model. You want to mention her name before who was that?
Ada Lovelace. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. But you know, Kurt, I was a programmer, you know, in my early days. Dr. Farida knows, you know, I was a techie, you know, before when I joined the business school. And I just got technology. I just got, you know, programming. It just came naturally to me. But and when people say, you know, when women, and I had a statistic that women in technology in Malaysia, there's only about 20% of them. And so when I look at the statistics in Maybank, there's about 36% of women in tech roles. Now, when I talked to the women in Maybank, I said, look, did you know that the first woman programmer was a woman, or the first programmer was a woman? And that was in the 19th century, right? So there is no biological basis to say that women are less adequate than men in technology. There's no such thing, right? At least I've not seen it in any journal, but
So
but yeah, there you go.
So you did mention that, and I brought up the books. There's 2 books with her in it. And so when Shameem is going to visit IU, and so any students out there at IU or faculty at IU who would like to meet her, she'll be on campus in a couple of weeks. And there's one book I'll lend to you. It's called Machines of Loving Grace: The Quest for Common Ground Between Humans and Robots by John Markoff, who's a New York Times reporter. And the other book is by Walter Isaacson. It's called The Innovators, how a group of hackers, geniuses, and geeks created the digital revolution. I have 2 copies, and I'm going to give you one of these 2 copies for you to take home if you want. So Ada Lovelace worked with Charles Babbage, creating the first, in effect, ideas about computers and computing in the 1800s and 1900s. So
Thank you.
In the 1800s,
sharing.
yeah.
Wow.
So yeah. So it's that was great for a half hour there, Shameem. You've done so much. I mean, it's just every time I meet you, talk to you, hear about you, there's something that you've done that sets the standard and bar a little bit higher for everybody else in the room. And that's always been the case. You know, when you were a graduate student, it was like talking to an early faculty member, career person, you know, it was like you were already minted PhD, but you had to come and actually defend a dissertation and then move into the corporate space again in a rather quick fashion, moving up and making an influence and an impact around the world with what you're doing. And I want to talk to you. The last question I'll have is about where you're going next, but we need to get audience questions in first before we go to the ending questions. So, Farida, how do you normally handle the audience questions?
So the questions are coming in. They're coming in from different devices. And so I think we'll be verging a little bit more into the criticality aspect of the discussion. And so, you know, and you had a PowerPoint, Shameem, that several folks have looked at. And so there's several questions that have emerged. Like I said, they're coming in from different devices that I have in front of me, so I'm kind of looking. So I'm going to ask the first critical question, one that came in, and one of them is that women fared better in terms of what you were saying at Maybank. There were more women certified in terms of the initiatives that you had taken to upskill. The question is it because women are not in the executive, levels of Maybank? Are there more in the workforce, and that's the reason there are more of them certified? Or is that not the case? And so, because then the question is, are women more in the workforce than in the executive levels? And so that's one of the questions. And the second critical question, I'll get to the others, and you can choose one or the other, is that you had also in your PowerPoint the old way and the new way of instructional of learning. And the old way obviously is 2 years of coursework or more. And the new way that Maybank is advocating is about 4 weeks. And so there's this, again, this is a critical question. The assumption is that everybody will get it that fast. And so the critical question is, where is the scaffolding? And
Yeah.
so, Thas, you can choose one or the other, and the questions keep coming. So,
Okay, so I'll answer both. That's the idea, yeah. So I'll answer the one on women, right? Let me share with you. I just have one slide here on the statistics, and I want to celebrate Malaysia as well on this note, you know, since it's Malaysia Day. Okay, so here are some gender statistics in Malaysia and in Maybank. So let me take a step back a bit and go up to the country level first. So in Malaysia, the percentage of females in Malaysia in the population of 32 million is 49%. And the US as a comparison is 51%. So it's roughly similar. Percentage of females in the Malaysian workforce, and this is where you see a huge difference, right? 39%, and the US is 47%. And actually, there were, if I'm not mistaken, the World Bank actually commented that the female participation in the Malaysian workforce is actually lower on average. Okay, now, and there are also social cultural, environmental reasons for that, but I won't go into that. Now, in celebration of Malaysia Day, I have some more, to your point earlier about whether there are less women in boards and so forth, right? Okay, the percentage of females in board now is at 26%, which for Malaysia, which is actually higher than the global average of 20%. Now, 26% is still lower, right? Because the majority are still men. But this comes not just, this has been actually a much lower figure 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So our goal in Malaysia is to reach the 30% at least by 2020, for which actually we are 4% short. But that was an aspiration that Malaysia came up with, I think back in 2015 or so. So Malaysia actually has made progress. In fact, 26% is the highest in Asia, because the Asia average is actually 11.7%. Malaysia also has higher female representation at board in comparison to Singapore at 17.6%. So there's always a Malaysian Singaporean competitiveness. So I, I just want to speak about that healthy competition, right? So now coming back to the point about why the percentage of women that were certified are higher than men in Maybank. Now, let me just say this one thing. The statistic that you're quoting is about our Future Ready. We call our digital upskilling program the Future Ready program. Now, taking that, there is a graph, there is a framework that I use, which is the ISPI framework, and also the McKinsey 7S framework. Which is, let me just take you to that slide here. Now, the first bubble there is about strategic relevance. So what do I mean by this? Is about asking the question, why? Why is digital relevant? I mean, let's go back to the basics. Is this a fad? Or is this going to stay? Is this going to be permanent? What's the future like? Why? And if it is really the aspiration of the bank, now let's translate it to the what. What do we train people on and who? So the first bubble is really about asking questions. Why, what, who, before we even ask how. So as instructional designers, I highly recommend and linking it to the overall objectives, because we don't want to spend time doing something that's not going to add value at the end of the day. So that's the first bubble, strategic relevance. So when we look back at now, okay, we accept that digital is important for the bank's mission and vision as a digital bank forward to remain relevant, etc. Then the question is, what do we train people on? And if we look at the what, we're talking about things like machine learning, AI algorithms. Okay, then the question comes in, who? And this is the part on inclusiveness. If you look at these statistics, the percentage of females in technology function is only 36%. So if I go with the normal route of just focusing on the technology people, right, who are supposed to do the machine learning AI algorithms, we will be perpetuating this gender divide because there's only 36% in the female technology function. So the strategy was to upskill everyone in the bank on AI and machine learning, because the percentage of females in Maybank is 56%. So the only way we could actually include more people, right, and not perpetuate this gender divide is to ensure that we upskill everyone, democratize AI learning, machine learning for all. And that is the reason why you see the percentage of females higher. It's not because of senior management being lower, but it's because everyone in the bank, the females in Maybank, is 56%. That's the reason.
Mm-hmm.
That
I think that's a good response, in a sense, that because the worry is that our women, again, being placed in the general workforce, and thus the training is focused on them, you know, rather than at the executive levels. And so that's a really good response, because it's a strategic response. The second question, there's a series of 3 questions here that I could get to, but the second question was the scaffolding, the speed of the training. And so could quickly address that, that we can get to the 3 questions that are now in the Q&A.
Right.
Yeah, right. I was going to ask one of those, but we'll wait till you. Yeah.
I love the question scaffolding, because this was when I was able to challenge the norms. You know, Professor Kurt Wong, you know, you mentioned about, you know, challenging the boundary, you know, alluding to that. And so the challenge was AI and machine learning. What does it take to upskill people in AI and machine learning? Well, it takes coding skills, unfortunately. Coding skills, which is an esoteric thing for many people, you know, it's so cryptic. And I started to get comments from senior leaders that, hey, you know, you either have the mindset to be able to code or you don't. I'm sorry, as an educator, again, I'm going back to our education values, right? No, everyone should be able to learn whatever they want, right? It's our job to make it accessible to them, right? To crack that code. And so when we look at how do we make coding, right, simpler for people, and we found that actually in the business area, 90% of people use this thing called Excel spreadsheets, right, to do all your, you know, basic analytics, right, basic analysis and so forth. But only 10% of people actually use things like Python and R, which is the, you know, machine learning programming language. And there is a huge learning curve to transition people from Excel to Python and R. Huge. I took, you know, 1 semester to learn programming, 4 months, right? And that's just the basics of programming. And here we have full-time employees, day-to-day job challenges. And how are we going to do that? I mean, practically speaking. So what I kind of, and I was working with INSEAD Business School at this point, and we were brainstorming, okay, how do we solve this? And so I said, hey, you know, why can't we have, in terms of scaffolding, right? Why can't we have Excel connect to Python and R, right? And all we need to do is just run the algorithms through Excel. It's just click here, click there, and we're done, right? Can it be done? Now, thankfully, I had a partner, right, a business school, INSEAD Business School, which are also, you know, trying to break boundaries and so forth. And they said, okay, interesting. We think we could do it, right? And so let me share with you. So in Maybank, the way we were able to actually bring down the hours of training was because we had this huge scaffolding where you don't need to learn Python and R, take weeks, because we actually put it within Excel. So you input the data in Excel. Everyone knows Excel. You don't have to upskill people on that. The back end, which people do not need to see, it goes to R and Python, and then the front end, the output comes back into Excel. So literally, here's the spreadsheet that it looks like. I can run regression analysis. I can run all these vector autoregressive models, forecasting models, right? Also and so forth within Excel, right? And so you can see here, you know, we have these tabs here. One tab is for data, right? And then, so this is where you input the data. And you can see the first column is the dependent variable. What is it you're trying to predict, right? And then you can put in all the independent variables and include that. So this is all within Excel. So do we need to train people on machine learning coding? No, all we need to do is to focus on what is this machine learning algorithm about, right? Okay, so this is the code in case people want to see what the code is. So you just click this button called Analyze. It's a button that you click. And then there you go. You have this forecasting, you know, model that comes into Excel back, right? And you can forecast forward, and then you can also do back testing to see whether the forecasting model works with the prior data. So all this in Excel. And so we focus now on getting the people to understand the algorithm. What is this? How does the forecasting model work? What are the key variables you need to understand about? And rather than the nitty-gritties of coding, right? So this was a tool, a scaffolding tool that I would say, which really helped to bring down the length of time in training. And within 5 days, because we asked people to bring in their data, and I call this impact learning, not just action learning, impact learning. Within 5 days, people were able to use machine learning algorithms and see the results on their data.
That's excellent. And I was trying to label my recent book "Making Impact," but the publisher changed the title. We made the preface and the intro about before making impact, time to make impact, and then after making impact. Anyways, we're up to the 4 questions that are showing up here in the Q&A, and that first one's an easy one and a hard one. It's a simple one and a challenging one. How do you communicate IST ideas or related ideas or instructional design ideas or other things you learned in the business school with those that don't know a lot about IST or business process models? What ways do you edge them in? Because in particular, IST is a field that's growing tremendously, and people around the world are becoming aware of it. Your mother and your brother and your sister are now, your father was trained in it, but other relatives are finding out it's front page news, online learning and distance ed and all blended, all this because of COVID and before COVID even. So they have to know about this somewhat. How do you communicate IST related ideas and models and concepts to them?
Right. I think, I think it starts with connecting with what people know. And I can't remember which learning theory this is now. I'm pretty sure,
maybe schema.
Schema theory, okay. Piaget, it could be, there are others, exactly I'm sure.
That's right. Connecting with what people know already, right? And people understand their frame of reference. In fact, Kurt, one of my current research was about NLG's natural language generation, but using the frame of reference that people have, to make the content more understandable. But anyway, so the point is that if I'm talking to business people, if I'm talking to a finance person, I need to speak their language first. So I need to say, okay, you want to have machine learning algorithms in finance. Why? Can you explain to me what impact, what metrics are you trying to drive at? And that's that they understand, right? And they say, okay, I want to actually reduce the cost of operations, and that's okay. So now next question is, okay, what are the processes? What's your vision of how this function should operate? Right? That's a strategic, big picture kind of question. So in this process, the analysis process, I don't need to explain that this is part of ISD analysis process, but I'm actually using analysis process in the language of the audience, asking them questions that they can relate to. And I think that really helps. If I'm talking to my CEO, I'm talking to him about, okay, why digital? What's the future, right? Are we aggressive enough, right? So these are the lingo, right? These are things that people can relate to. And I'm taking a systems approach there. I'm taking a strategic approach there. And so I'm using the framework as my backdrop, but using and speaking the language of the audience, if that
So,
makes
so
sense.
you're relating it to current initiatives, projects, experiences that they've had, and that's a way to build that in. The terminology can come as part of that along the way, and gradually they can get to know about the field, but you don't explicitly teach it on the front end and force it on them. And we found the same thing true here with various teacher training programs. We'll go to the second question. So the first one from Joey Wu. Thank you, Joey Wu. Second one, Carrie Luders says, is a really important question here. You know, she points out that it's documented in the US that many adults with disabilities are unemployed. The percentages are, you know, striking. And earlier you indicated that part of your purpose at Maybank and for you in general is to make sure that the workforce is employable and trying to be as inclusive as you can be. So from your perspective, what have you done, what has Maybank done to provide a more inclusive training and development and supports for those that might have disabilities?
Right. The first thing that we do is to ensure that our leaders, now I'm going, again, the systems approach, right? And looking at what actually creates a conducive learning environment. And at least from many organizational studies, right? If you look at it, what really impacts the system, the leadership, the people, particularly senior leaders. If senior leaders care about ensuring that education, or rather the job task, it does not discriminate against certain disabilities, then the rest of the system needs to be adapted to that goal, right, to that vision. So number one is the leaders, preparing the leaders. And on that note, I've already shared how passionate my leaders in Maybank are about learning, making it inclusive. And so that actually sets a huge backdrop in terms of our policies. Secondly, is to ensure that, we have developed this thing called adaptive learning engine. So it sounds very techy, but actually it's a simple, framework. There's a set of questions. It's like a profiling thing, which actually looks at the individual learners' backgrounds, predispositions, learning styles, and so forth. And through that questionnaire, we are actually adapting our training, content, and delivery approach to the audience. So for example, if we have people with disabilities, that adaptive learning engine would identify those certain disabilities, and then we as trainers are guided by, okay, these are the parameters that we have to operate within and customize it as such. So I don't know whether that answers the question a bit. So there's a technology aspect, aspect.
She can go in the Q&A and see if there's a follow-up. I want to switch to the last questions. Minhui Seo says it's really impressive, both you and your organization, in terms of the training that's provided at Maybank. I was wondering how you engage every employee within the organization for the digital transformation that we're facing today, and whether you're providing a growth mindset just like yours. I realize you have a growth mindset. She's picked up on that too. Do you try to cater your training to get people to embrace a growth mindset within your organization? And what are other ways you're equipping them for the digital transformation? Maybe it's Coursera. I'll plug Python programming by Chuck Severance. It's the #1 programming course in the world out of Michigan, University of Michigan. He's a good friend of mine. But anyways, what are you doing there?
Sure. Thank you for that question, because it's such an important question. We're not just training people for knowledge and skills today, right? Which might be, outdated, in a few months, a few weeks, that kind of thing, right? And so let me share with you growth mindset. That is one. Okay, this slide here I'm going to go back a bit to the objectives of the Future Ready Upskilling Program. So when we conceptualized this, late 2017, the senior leaders clearly said, hey, this is not just about knowledge and skills, okay? We need to focus on the mindset, because all this technology is going to change very quickly. Cloud technologies have evolved so fast, right? Machine learning algorithms can do so much more than what it was before. So we need people to embrace a mindset of continuous learning. So how did we do this? So this was the objective right from the onset, right? Taking a longer term perspective of what's coming as well, and ensuring that we have the mindset of learning. So what we did was, number one, we had this thing called the Future Ready Lab. Now the question was about how do we ensure everyone, right, is included in this digitalization initiative. So we have this thing called the Future Ready Lab, where every employee, so the first point here, all staff had to be involved, no one left behind. Now there was a lead up to this. A key stakeholder in the bank, in Maybank at that time, we had 9 unions. Okay, so a key stakeholder were the unions themselves. The union, we have unions for security guards, you have unions for junior executives, you have unions for messengers and so forth. So we got the union members, and actually here, this picture here is the union members, right, coming into this Future Ready Lab, and the question to them, and we actually shared about the growth mindset, what is the growth mindset, the differences between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And we got them involved in a workshop to talk about, okay, what are the behaviors of the growth mindset in the workplace that we would like to see and practice? What are the fixed mindset behaviors that we are seeing today we need to change? So we got them into this workshop, the Future Ready Lab, and the unions they loved it, because they say, hey, you know what, we know that our jobs may not be fully secure. No one can guarantee us full-time jobs moving forward. But while waiting, we need to learn. We don't just wait on the, and look at this as a bystander. So the involvement of the union, the key stakeholder there, the unions, into this conversation, and then bringing all. So if you see, the learning team did not do these workshops. We trained the leaders, the line managers, to conduct this growth mindset, asking questions workshop. So we trained the line managers to be facilitators of the Future Ready Lab, because that creates ownership, that I'm a line manager, I need to facilitate learning in my team. If someone else is teaching my team to do growth mindset and I'm not bought into it, it doesn't work, right, on a day-to-day basis. So this was that cascading effect. So GHC is Group Human Capital, 10 of us, we train the line managers, 1,000 over managers, and these 1,000 over managers facilitated these lab sessions where people would come in, brainstorm, about growth mindset, about what is digitalization, how can we practice it on the workplace. And if we don't know the answer, let's look for the answer. So we told the line managers, you are not experts. We are not teaching you to be experts, but you just ask the questions, right? And learn together. So that was the process of it. Yeah.
That was the perfect question to ask, because you are ready for it. I mean, that was just like symbiotic here, Yeah. We didn't plan for any of these particular questions. And there are a couple more. Taib, I'm sorry, I've kind of asked his question about, people are attacking the traditional models of IST, like, the ADDIE model. And he's asking, do those still have a role in training and development? And we only have a couple minutes here left. And I have another question to ask you. So I'm going to ask a simple, to answer his question, do you have a 15-second answer for the traditional models and the criticisms they have? Do they still carry any weight within your organization?
Okay, so quick answer is certainly, I hope I have, made an impression that a lot of things that I have done is based on all the learning theories, the ISD theories, right? Analysis, strategic analysis, right? Design, development, implementation, evaluation. The E, of course, I think it was Professor Bikul Maya who said, hey, to me at least, the E is not at the end, the E starts from the, beginning, and Dr. Pershing as well, So ADDIE model, absolutely relevant. ISD model, absolutely relevant. Learning sciences, theories, all that absolutely relevant. I think we just need to find ways to make it faster, cheaper, free education, right? Not just primary, but, so that's
Free and open education. So so take Dr. Kwan's 521, and get the models and then build on that. And there are many other courses you can take, but I want to at least give you a 30-second, another 1 minute to answer. What's your future going to look like in 5 or 10 years from now? What do you envision you doing? And, where will you be?
I absolutely like my ability right now to push the boundaries of education, at least for the workforce, right? And at the same time, implement it and to see the results in an organization like Maybank. So I'm a pretty sweet spot, as they say, right? I have a lab, and my lab is Maybank, and I have the ability to learn all these new technologies, which is my research and my Fulbright scholarship, ability to work with researchers globally, excellent opportunities, right? So I see myself pushing the boundaries, hopefully more, making sure that we can provide the best teacher experience for all, everyone who wants to learn.
Mm-hmm. With that, I want to thank you, Dr. Shameem Farouk and Dr. Bonk, for this, exciting, insightful conversation. Dr. Farouk will be here upon the invitation of the Global and International Engagement Unit on our campus. The invitation is also extended by the Hamilton Luger School. And so we'll have her here for about 2 weeks. So if you want to connect with Professor Farouk, you'll get another chance. And so thank you, everyone. And again, to our participants online, to the R711 students, and to everyone else who's joined us. Thank you, and stay tuned to the next global and international webinar, which happens once every month. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.